Now, I normally start these things with a joke which really tries to show my ignorance on the basis that I'm the person who knows least about the subject in the room, which is normally true. On this occasion, actually, that's not quite true because our house burnt down 3 years ago. And we decided, in the moment of madness, as we drove back from the Yorkshire Dale, and been run up by the police force who refused to tell us what was going on, that we would rebuild the house green, and we had just completed a carbon negative house. Largely achieved, may I say, but not using rockwood. But we'll come back to it. We did use a bit of rockwood, but I'll tell you. But it was an off. But it's been maybe because we didn't use rockwood, it's been a complete nightmare. Buildings dreadful. We're too nice to build to confuse my human beings, which is a great mistake. So drama goes on over money and things, but which I've learned a very important lesson, which is to never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, practice what you preach. Anyway, so here we are, and we're talking about green homes. There's a number of questions here, which seem to be largely irrelevant, but we are talking whether the government is as our current plans focus on new build homes the best way forward for the government. I thought it wasn't focused on new build homes. The Green Deal was actually the big thing and so on and so forth. So the questions are pretty ludicrous, so I'm not going to read them out. We'll take it where we go and draw policy and changes agenda. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. So we're talking about green homes, we're talking about the 2016 target, whether it exists, we're talking about the Green Deal, we're talking about the huge amount of heat that goes to waste in our homes and how we can legalize it is one of the most important things we can do. And I haven't worked out what order people are going to speak in. Does anyone have any views? We'll speak first. So here we are, policy exchange. We know them to start the speaking last. So, we'll turn on Guy Newey. Now, Guy Newey is one of these people whose career has gone downhill, I'm afraid. He started off as a journalist, 3 years as a foreign correspondent in Hong Kong, and has washed up a place like this, where he is now research fellow for Environment and Energy Unit.
Thanks, I think. My great promotion from journalism, actually. I'm going to start off talking about my flat, which is obviously the most important issue in energy efficiency in the UK. I live in a place that has lots of the classic problems we're talking about as far as greening buildings. It's a 1920s building, converted flats, single brick, single glazed. After freezing or winter, we've looked at how we can install double glazing, but in one particular window, because obviously we live in a conservation area. And so we've gone to the council, and even though this is a back window leading onto a little terrace, we've been told we can't change the window. This is even though it's not overlooking the road, it's not being seen by anyone else. In fact, the only thing that can see it is a pigeon that sits on the house at the top facing us. But it kind of shows, because it's a conservation area, we can't change from wood to UPVC. And in fact, the council says UPVC.
Is that environment friendly?
Well, it is, yes. Double glazing, as it's known. Not that PVC, no. And so this is kind of raises lots of the issues we're talking about from a policy point of view. So I just want to talk a bit about some of the overall questions. So the big question, of course, in the UK is how can we decarbonise? And as Policy Exchange has been stressing, how can we decarbonise as cheaply as possible? Greener, cheaper, as we constantly say. And energy efficiency is going to be a big part of that. What do policymakers need to try and achieve? How can you make energy efficient decisions about buying a property, letting a property? How can you make energy efficiency a bigger part of that? Because I think lots of us would agree that at the moment that tends to be ignored. It's all about location and obviously price. So how can policy help? And we've had 20 years of looking at policy on energy efficiency at homes, and frankly, it doesn't seem to be working too well. With energy demand in the residential sector is up 7% since 1990. Most of that is everyone's obsession with new gadgets. So we're talking about flat screen TVs, PlayStations, cappuccino makers, all the important stuff in life. So policy-wise, how can we kind of make energy efficiency a greater part of the decision? I'm looking at a piece of work at the moment on energy efficiency in the business sector, where lots of the issues and the barriers that get in the way of people doing energy efficiency stuff are exactly the same. So we've got the 4 or 5 key things. 1, price. Energy prices obviously in the news a lot at the moment. 2, information. Lack of people understanding what in the house they use is the biggest consumers of energy. That's still a huge problem as far as I can see. I'm not sure many members of the general public know what a kilowatt hour is or what a unit on your bill is, which is often estimated and unclear. We've got classic split incentive problems, obviously, between landlord and tenants and how we get through that, but also between the builders and the occupiers who have different responsibilities. But also, as in my case in Crouch End, between the neighbourhood and the neighbourhood wanting to look nice and the kind of need to reduce energy. And on top of that, an area which is getting much more attention at the moment is the kind of behaviour, what gets in the way, which is the hassle factor, the social norms, the fact we've got short discount rates. And one of the things that feeds into that is this problem of rebound effects, i.e. The average temperature now in a household is about 17 degrees. In 1970 it was about 13 degrees. So that's not necessarily, I mean, there are some health reasons for that, but that's mainly because people have kind of, their comfort level has changed. I did a piece of research looking at a social housing project that was trying to reduce its emissions, and you come against these behavioural problems, these lifestyle choices all the time, and one of the interviewees, he said, they were talking about rights and right to do what you like and he goes, what it comes down to is this is the right to walk around in my own home, in my pants, in the middle of winter. That was the important issue for him. And these are the kind of behavioural issues you've got to get over from policymakers have got to get over. So just going through those those 4 factors. Price is an issue, and obviously you've got energy bills doing part of the work for you, never out of the news. I'm very pleased I just switched to Scottish Power. It's a sharp economic move. But you've got these confused carbon prices across the economy, and especially in the domestic sector where you have gas with a very different effective carbon price from electricity. Also, these are all hidden, so consumers don't necessarily understand them in the bills, and policy exchanges don't work on why these should be highlighted. On the information side, we've proposed better billing, as I say, but we've also talked. One of the big issues going forward is smart meters, and I think that's going to be a real game changer in this area. Split incentives, obviously regulation is one area, and kind of minimum standards. Zero carbon, which I think this talk was initially going to be focused around, is passed by the wayside. I think our view is it's a great slogan, but it's very complex in reality. And behaviour, and I think this is where the Green Deal comes in. Our view on the Green Deal is that it is essentially a behavioural tool for removing the hassle for people to get energy efficiency investments. It makes it much easier to get finance, much easier to get information and accredited installers of equipment, and kind of obviously matches the investment to the length of payback time. So just like to finish talking about smart meters a bit. I think smart meters are going to be a crucial stage of this, because this is going to make people understand where they waste energy in the home. A couple of years ago, Gordon Brown did a big speech that seemed to be based around the idea of everyone unplugging their phone chargers, which is obviously helpful, but is pretty irrelevant. As David Mackay says, if everyone does a little, we'll achieve a little. And I think we need to achieve a lot more, and policy should be ambitious and coherent looking at that issue.
Thank you, Guy. That's very good. I like your wandering around in the pants. When I write about renewable energy and energy conservation, all these sort of troglodytes who comment on everybody on the blog right in saying, in your future you'll freeze. And I just have to report that we went to this new house at Christmas, and we remember what Christmas was like. And because we had people in the house, we had to open all the windows because it was too hot, because it was so well insulated. And that brings me immediately to Hans Schroeder, who is the managing director of Rockwell. And if you want to know what Rockwell is, and no one in the room knows what Rockwell is, I have a statement to make. Rockwell is the UK's leading manufacturer of energy-efficient home wall insulation. Based in Wales, Rockwell works closely with energy companies in the development of the CERT programme, and also works with charities in the training of long-term unemployed people to develop a career in installation. In addition to providing installation services in the residential market, Rockwell has refurbished all the National Trust properties in Wales, as well as London's historic royal palaces. So you see where we decided not to use this stuff. Actually, the main reason was that we wanted to build a carbon negative house, and so we actually used hempcrete, which meant we put 20 tons of hemp and lime, so if it burns down again, the farmer would at least be happy. And remember, if you put 20 tons of carbon into the walls, in the hemp, which is the second fastest growing plant in the planet, and gave us thermal mass, which one using the bottles in winter time. But we did look at Rockwell. We have got Rockwell in the roof, I have to say, and I did learn during this whole thing, rather to my surprise, that actually less energy is expended in creating Rockwell than any other comparable insulation material, including stuff that sounds more environmentally friendly, actually useful, and newspapers, which is rather good for obvious reasons. So Hans, he's the managing director of the UK and Ireland business of Rockwell, which describes as a challenging role.
Thank you for the introduction, especially the second one, the first one was slightly different. But I think by what you mentioned, and also your neighbor, I think there's one issue that plays a big role in all this development, that is the vocabulary we are using. I think a lot goes on about energy efficiency, and I think a lot of people don't realize what it can bring far more to them than just lower energy bills. And that is one of the big challenges the industry is faced with. Because people don't really get turned on by talking about energy efficiency. They don't only get excited by reducing their energy bills. It's easy to make. I'm not a technician, but I can easily make for you a carbon negative home, but you probably don't want to live in it. Because reducing energy consumption is actually pretty straightforward. But you want to create a place which has a comfortable indoor comfort, that has the right acoustics. There are many other elements linked to it. And all the discussions around it towards the consumers, it's all about energy efficiency. And I think we miss out a lot. If we want to create some pull from the consumer side, we need to work far more on those elements. That was just a quick on the elements you mentioned. We touched upon very shortly the zero carbon homes. I'm glad that it has been put to the side of the agenda. I think it's a good development from an innovation perspective. I think driving that development will help to innovate in that area. But the actual contribution to energy reduction and to carbon reduction emission is very limited. Because if you see the step from current building standards to zero carbon, I think it's an enormous cost to get only a marginal improvement. Allocating those resources, focusing on the existing building stock, would give a far better carbon return on investment than actually in the new build. Do I need to speak louder?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll try it again without, but a bit louder. The other thing has been mentioned as well, the behavior impact. You can't just design a technical building. People have to adapt the way they live in those zero carbon homes if you actually want to get the benefits out of it. And we shouldn't underestimate the requirements it puts actually on the homeowners to be able to do it. So again, I think also on the regulation front, what we see, where I think we can make bigger steps, is to make sure that when new regulations are introduced, we close the loopholes that allow buildings to be built for a long time after the new regulations are in place, by actually enforcing that the new regulations are applied immediately. Last time building regulations on the thermal performance of buildings changed, there were more than 100,000 properties put up for development, so they could still be built according to the old standards, although the new are in place already since October last year. Another thing which is also very much relevant for the existing building stock, but also for new build. What is actually being done to drive consumer demand? We can put in place a lot of policies, but the industry will react on demand from the market. What is in place today to motivate people to go for a zero carbon home? What is in place to motivate them to lower the carbon emissions of their existing home? Very little is there. There is very little pull from the consumer market to take up in these areas. But then we come, of course, to the existing building stock, and I think everybody agrees to that the biggest achievement that can be reached is by dealing with our existing building stock. Especially in the UK, because we have an energy efficiency level of the existing building stock, which is basically the lowest of all of Europe. So the progress that can be made is far more important than in other countries. Decarbonizing the energy we use, great development, should be focused on, should be developed. But again, let's make sure we use less of it, so we also need less development in that area. All components to actually improve our existing buildings are actually there. So it's not about what do we have to do, it's about how are we going to do that. And I think that is the biggest struggle. How to translate it from a concept to something that can be translated in a sustainable industry practice. How can the industry be incentivized to make sure that we get the delivery mechanisms in place? Because there is no requirement for any rocket science to actually upgrade the property to very good standards for energy efficiency. If we look at the developments in the pipeline, we got the ECO, the Energy Company Obligation, and the Green Deal. It can, again, be a massive contributor to reducing the carbon emissions. But it will be key to drive initial momentum. Because if we don't get it off the ground initially, if there's no take-up from the general public, nothing will actually happen. If we look to the past projects, schemes we had EEC1, we had EEC2, followed by CERT, we got CESP. Why did that work? Why did that deliver a significant amount of energy efficiency measures? Was that because the energy companies were so concerned about carbon emissions? I don't really think so. I think it had all to do with a big stick, which was 10% penalty of turnover if they wouldn't deliver the targets that were set. And I think this approach, you can't just count on it that people on their own initiative will do it because it's the right thing to do. Looking at the new schemes, I think it is good to continue with the Energy Company Obligation, having clear sticks there to drive the momentum from the energy companies. But we need to put in place the proper combination of carrots and sticks for the homeowner. Today, people, it's all on push. The energy companies are doing a lot to drive the installation of energy measures. But there is very, very little activity, which is even driven by pull demand from the consumers. There is no reason. I always wonder, like, when I buy a car nowadays, I actually look at the CO2 emissions. Do I look at that because I'm so concerned about global warming? It's also because there are the relevant tools around it. I pay lower tax on a company car when it has low emissions. I don't pay my congestion charge in London if I have a low emission car. And on top of it, yes, I contribute something to the environment. When we expect that people will just improve their homes because they think it's the right thing to do, I think we will be highly disappointed. How many Toyota Priuses would be driving around if those financial sticks and carrots would not be in place? And people would only buy it because they think it's the right thing to do. I think it would be very, very difficult. I think that the government has to be smart. I think there's a lot of discussion in many, many different platforms going around the Green Deal. And we have to find smart ways to incentivize the people to take up on this. And I think it's a pity they've missed, in my view, quite an opportunity by recently increasing stamp duties for properties above £1 million. It would have been so easy to say we increase that stamp duty even maybe by a bit more. Because let's be honest, people in those properties, they are what we call the able to pay category. But if you then link the level of stamp duty, for example, to the energy rating of your property, it can easily become a no-brainer to make the decision to actually invest in your property, creating extra work, improving the energy efficiency. So on the end, if you do the mathematics on it, the revenue stream for the government can also be positive. So I think there should not be, because we feel there is a lot of reluctance still at the moment, between a lot of good intentions from an environmental, from a carbon perspective, but a lot of reluctance on the government side to actually put there the right carrots and sticks in a balanced way, step by step, to introduce them. Because without having that in place, I think it is a little bit like having a car without fuel. It may look great, but it won't get us anywhere. I think stamp duty is an opportunity, council tax is an opportunity, VAT rates, a lot has been done in other countries with VAT rates to stimulate the refurbishment work. So there are plenty of opportunities. So I think it's talking less about the actual ambition level and far more talking about what are we going to put in place to get it moving forward.
Thank you, Hans. Very good. Well, you know how the zero carbon homes emerged in the first place. Probably David Cameron's first achievement, he actually had that to do with it. When David Cameron went green, David Miliband and Emmett Shepherd both thought they were likely to be fighting him one day when he went green on becoming leader. And of course one of them was wrong and the other one may yet be right. But for David it was easy because he was at the Department of, whatever they call it those days, the Department of the Environment, but he was definitely a radical figure on it to many incarnations. You know, it was originally Peter Walker who started what he called the Department for Life, and he almost got it until Ted Heath realised that we were making him Minister for Life. Sorry, that's my one. But anyway, so Yvette, bugging off to Scandinavia, because she was housing minister, looked at lots of zero carbon homes, came back, called me in, and announced the story for me she was going to go zero carbon by 2016. That's the science that was behind it. Oh dear friend, that's the truth. But also talking of Cameron, when I was talking about my house and the resource, there were great says about Jeffrey, you've got to make sure you insulate it well before you go for the renewable. So I said, yes, we are. And I didn't say it, because I should have done. No, we're not thinking about a wind turbine or anything like that on the roof. Anyway, so Colin is the next speaker. Colin Hines is an old friend and sparring partner. I think we first came across each other in Greenpeace when you were in Greenpeace, but he's been in this business almost as long as me, or maybe even longer than me. And there's now, God, he's co-director called Finance for the Future. Never heard of a more meaningless name. So most of my finances are in the past, so perhaps it means something, but there you are, there are, and his name's always bother me. But anyway, one of his great distinctions was that he did a report called The Green New Deal quite recently. People Ireland, Caroline Lucas was one, I think, and various other people. And that phrase, oddly enough, has caused up and gone into the language. It's picked up by the United Nations Environment Programme and others. South Korea devoted 63% of its stimulus package to the Green New Deal. We've heard that phrase go around the world. Well, I think it started there. Am I right? Yep. Yeah, there you are. Anyway, he claims it, anyway. So Colin, as I say, is co-director of Finance for the Future. Maybe after this program, I'll have some idea what it means. And he's now with in the West Midlands, putting a very ambitious programme of insulation, etc., into practice. Now, Colin, you have until Andrew Style turns up to speak. So, how long are you going to be listening to you? We don't want to complete filibuster, but you know, keep Colin.
Thank you. Well, I can't sit down, so when I talk, I stand up, and I can do the Fidel Castro form.
You may have to.
So it could last much. But assuming that he'll probably arrive after I've been going for 10 seconds.
You have a bit longer then, you've got 10 seconds.
Yeah. What I'd like to really talk about is why I think energy efficiency, going from the dull and the deeply uninspiring, is likely to turn into being one of the cornerstones of saving our economy. Now, the reason I say that is in 2007, as Jeffrey said, I got together a group of people who knew that, we wouldn't just thought, we knew that a huge credit crunch was coming. There was no way around it. It was madness what was going on. And so I started to read up what Roosevelt had done in the 30s to tackle the aftermath of this. And so basically looked at the New Deal and changed it only in two parts. First of all, they called it the Green New Deal, because obviously we weren't just talking about dams and roads, we were talking about improving energy, reducing the throughput of raw materials, etc., etc. But also, most of the New Deal was public money. And so the Green New Deal was both concentrating on environmental improvements, but secondly, recognising that absolutely central to that was bringing in the truckloads of money that exists privately, particularly in the pension schemes. And so while we were producing a report like that, I've been working for some time with a group called Localised West Midlands in Birmingham, because I always felt that Birmingham was absolutely a key city, because first of all it's the largest local authority in Europe, and has real economic problems with declining economic base and unemployment, etc., etc. So we started to talk to them about the Green New Deal, and to cut a long story short, what happened that was really lucky. Finance for the Future is, it's a bit of a cocky name really, because I know nothing about finance. But as luck but as luck would have it, I met someone called Christoph Harwood from Marshall Consulting who does understand. He's got a background in finance, and he was working with the Energy Savings Trust, trying to bring in private money in order to find the 70 billion quid that we need to get energy efficiency going, etc., etc. So basically, Christoph and I went up to Birmingham. To cut a long story short, Birmingham is now starting the largest energy efficiency program, I think, in Britain. They're just going out to tender to get a structure going, which will eventually pull in £100 million to do 15,000 houses. They then intend to move that on to eventually do 200,000 houses. So you're talking over £1 billion by the time this process gets going over about 15 years. And so crucial to that will be private sector money. And it looks like this mixture of using the local authority, which is absolutely crucial in the rollout of the Green New Deal, I think. Because local authorities have access through some arcane thing called the Public Works Loan Board to treasury money at a fairly cheap interest rate. Also, they can liaise with the utilities who have to do a certain amount of energy efficiency for assessment and all those kinds of things. And so what Birmingham's starting with is providing a lot of that money itself from the Treasury and money from the utilities. And then as the programme rolls out, private banks will come in. And the real purpose of this is twofold. First of all, we need external money to come in. Secondly, the discipline of banks with their usual touching and humane approach of who can I sue if this goes wrong, will ensure a kind of top-down improvement in end applications of getting the energy efficiency in houses, hopefully. But secondly, and more importantly, this is part of a longer game to get pension money in. We've spoken a lot to pension funds, and they basically say we understand the economics of energy efficiency. We understand that clearly there is a safe return, not dramatically safe, over decades, exactly the kind of profile we need. But we haven't seen any evidence of the private sector being in on any huge scale, and we have fiduciary responsibility to our pensions, yada yada. So nothing happens much on the pension scheme. So what we are hoping will happen, not just in Birmingham, but also in Newcastle, we've been looking in Wales and Scotland, is that we will get to a stage where you have something like £300 million worth of energy efficiency programs that involve bank money in it, to get you to the level where you can actually float a bond for the pension funds to come in and refinance it over a long period. So this is really a very, very crucial, potential, large-scale amount of money coming into energy efficiency. The importance of it is because if we don't get that kind of money, and what's interesting about involving the local authorities is they see this. I mean, Birmingham, like every local authority in the world, promises to cut its carbon by 250% yesterday. No real idea how to get there. And so clearly they want to reduce carbon, but much more importantly, Birmingham wants an economic development programme, a jobs programme, a business opportunity programme. Pension fund managers are looking for a safe savings programme. And energy efficiency, because it's labour intensive, is a crucial way forward. And one of the things we always say in the Green New Deal is that if this gets going, it's actually, it will be a good example of intergenerational solidarity. I don't know whether Geoffrey was being unkind about the colour of my hair, implying I don't have much future.
Not what I did, anyway.
But it's quite important, I think. People with hair my colour have got access to, not me sadly, because I was an idiot environmentalist, but most of my friends, nice pension pots, to utilise that in order to have a career structure to our kids. I mean, we can get rid of them, get them out of the house, they're with us till their mid-30s. So this is a definite programme, intergenerational solidarity. And it needs to be seen like that. Because to make this work, you need to train a carbon army to crawl over every building in Britain, making it energy tight and using renewables where necessary. That's a vast range of skills, a vast range of skills. And it is, since there are so many buildings, it's not a 5-year wonder. It will last decades. Therefore, the old-fashioned concept of career comes back. It is actually a career structure. So finally, and to be a bit unkind to the present government, the other reason I'm optimistic about this is because just as the Green New Deal people looked at what was going on in 2007 and felt there was going to be another significant economic downturn, we're now convinced that the austerity programme here and everywhere else will also cause a substantial economic downturn. Out of this mess emerges the one really good, potentially labour-intensive thing that the government's doing at the moment, the Green Deal programme. And I think it will be seen as that, as a real clawing their way out of deflation. So I'm very optimistic that actually, at last, out from the boring cold will come energy efficiency and renewables to be seen as a central part of reinvigorating our economy, as a jobs generator, as a business generator, but also as a pension fund safe haven for savers. We have to see the future, have to see savers as our saviours. Very last sentence, absolutely crucial in this, is overcoming what I rather crassly call the I can't be asked syndrome. Why energy efficient? I mean, we can't all do what Geoffrey did. You burn down our houses and then it's not effective. It's not efficient. It's not efficient. So we've actually got to seriously concentrate on how we can sell this to people in a sensible way. Well, again, one of the advantages of involving local authority is that they have got these kinds of contacts, and it's got to go between that, it's got to go tenants associations, PTAs, everybody's got to get involved. Once some good instances happen, then people will start to like the idea, particularly as the energy cost soars. So, I am immensely optimistic that the Green Deal, with its attachment of the cost to the house, not the individual person, will be a huge future part of the government who will be desperate for jobs. And this is a great jobs generator where people live. So I think the future, after being rather dreary for the last few decades of energy efficiency, is rather bright.
And what's the composition of the council that's doing all this?
The council that's doing all this, thank you, because I forgot to say that, is Conservative Liberal government. Birmingham's the largest local authority in England. It's a coalition.
So it works. This is worked.
Absolutely. Well, if they look at Birmingham, then this is the way forward for the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Well, we're delighted Andrew's been able to join us after a very busy morning. Andrew is the Minister at DCRG in charge of building standards, and many, many other things. Now, it's a pretty good rule of thumb, I found in 40 years of doing this, that a minister doesn't have the slightest idea of what he's talking about. But Andrew, oddly enough, is an exception, because his whole career has really been building up to this moment. He was in architecture before politics, with nothing that comes later. And then spent 7 years in Liberal Democrat energy spokesman. And I believe sort of grabbed building regulations when he got him, so found nobody else wanted to do it. Probably was the pick of the bag, really, but never mind. And anyway, he is the MP for Hazel Grove, who sounds like an archetypal telegraph reader, actually. Hazel Grove? Yeah. And I'm very interested, there's a whole section of his website about my contact with Hazel Grove, so that's even more interesting. Anyway, he is one of the most, hard-working young people, I can assure you, because he tells us so. His website, Working Hard from Bredbury, Comstock, Great Moor, Hawk Green, Hazel Grove, Heverley, High Lane, Marple Bridge, Mellor, David, Offerton, Romilly, Rosehill, Strunt and Woodley since 1997. I really want to get hold of a map of these issues and find out if there was somebody who's not working hardcore before this, but I didn't manage to find one. Anyway, Andrew, after the election, was one of the architects of the coalition, the former coalition agreement, so you know exactly who to blame. And I lost track of him now, it's really very serious. Anyway, so I will turn him on, Andrew.
Incidentally, and just a piece of advice, if you were thinking that the way to start was burn your home down, it's not good for your carbon footprint.
No,
yeah, well, if there is anywhere that I haven't listed, we'll add it to the list. Right, well, all the time that I have come to events like this, it's irritated me no end that ministers turn up late, make a speech and then clear off. Well, I've only turned up late. I'm not intending to clear off early, so you will get a little bit more of me. And I was asked to give some introductory words, which I will do. Clearly, climate change is the biggest problem facing the world. We all know that. You know that we have pledged to be the greenest government ever. We are sticking with the intention of reducing our carbon footprint by 80% by 2050 as a country. And we all know in this room that the built environment is the key to that. It isn't transport, and it's frustrated me for many years that there's so much political energy goes into stopping you using your car, and almost none into stopping you using your house, which actually produces twice as much carbon each year as your car. 42% or something around that of carbon emissions come from buildings, 27% or something like that comes from our homes. And we also know that 75% of our current stock is still going to be with us by the time we get to 2050. So yes, it's very important to deal with the new stock, but it's equally important to deal with the existing stock. And well, if you added up all the new zero carbon buildings that we can have created by 2050, that would probably be only about a quarter of the then building stock. So yes, let's have zero carbon, let's do all of those things, but that will actually only affect a quarter of the buildings that will then be existing. So we have to do something with the other 75%. And I think you've already heard about the Green Deal, and there are plenty of, if you like, incentive pools that we are putting into place. The Green Deal, feed-in tariff, renewable heat obligation, and indeed the energy company obligation, the ECO, which, if you like, are putting in money and support to make people do stuff. But there's also scope for a regulatory push as well as an incentive pull. And as you've been kind enough to say, when I turned up at the department, I discovered that nobody was particularly stepping forward to do anything about building regulations. So I thought I would take that on. The first thing we did was to implement the planned changes, so the energy standards for new buildings went up by 25% last October. I'm now consulting on the next round of changes and improvements, and the choice is absolutely clear. We either make our buildings more sustainable or we will lose our battle against climate change. That is what has to happen. We've announced that in 2016 we're going to have zero carbon home standard for homes, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. So we're doing stuff for new builds, we're doing stuff for existing, and the key question for me is, what is the cheapest way of reducing carbon? It's not as if we've got money coming out of our ears, it's not as if the economy has got a lot of surplus that we don't know what to do with. And so the question is, how do we save carbon? And I keep asking, well, I ask anybody, I'll ask this audience, if you had £100 million, how many tonnes of carbon could you save? What policies would you follow to reduce carbon by the most you could with £100 million? And you come back to the very unglamorous answer that it's retrofitting existing buildings will save carbon most cheaply compared to anything else you can do. So there you go, the government's key approach is continuous improvement in standards for new build, Also making sure that we deliver on retrofitting existing buildings and particularly existing homes. And as a government, we take the battle against climate change very seriously. We want to deliver on the promises that we make. And that brings me to zero carbon homes, where I understand my spies, I have spies here of course, my spies tell me that some comments have already been made about zero carbon homes. You can have whatever targets you want. Labour were good at targets. It's actually achieving the targets that matters. And what we now know with zero carbon homes is no zero carbon home has been built in this country which met its specification. And we know from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation evaluation of Elm Tree Mews in York, residents were very comfortable and pleased with the homes. Yes, it was great, but the homes were losing, on average, 54% more energy than they were supposed to. And that report concluded that there's huge changes needed in the processes and cultures within industry and within the supply chain if zero carbon homes is to be more than an empty slogan. So if people say you should set higher targets for zero carbon homes, I say, yeah, we should, but let's get that 54% gap between what they said in the textbook it was going to do and what actually happens put right as well. So that's why, as part of the work I've commissioned, is that we are looking forward in upgrading the building regulations next year to tackling the whole issue of compliance and performance of buildings. I've put together an advisory committee. Well, I've got an expert advisory committee. Putting it together is rather overstating my role in it, but we have set up an advisory committee on compliance to look at what we can do to make sure that standards are met and carbon reductions in the built environment become a reality. So there you have it. There were 3 questions posed. I gather you've already chewed those over. We've got to green new homes, we've got to green old homes, and then we've got to turn targets into compliance, and that is my job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Now we open this discussion. We've got, how long have we got to 2 o'clock? So we've got 40 minutes of discussion. Good God, we've got lots of ideas. Can I just kick off with one you said before you? Hans, you were talking about 100,000 homes. Do you want to answer that question to the
Yes.
minister?
You mentioned the group on building regulations. The industry is always trying to prepare properly to make sure the solutions we offer deliver what the increased building regulations demand. But there is a loophole where many developers can actually present plans for properties that have not yet been built, where they can still build them after the actual legislation comes into place. And this year, this time last year, there has been a massive amount of figures out there, up to 100,000 properties, which means actually what's being built in 1 year at this moment in the UK. What people still can get away with building according to the previous standards. And I think there is a possibility there to actually be far stricter on enforcing that once a new legislation, a new regulation comes into place, to actually make sure that yes, those are under construction, finished with the old regulations, but those were actually just in the early stage of planning should not be allowed to be built still according to old regulations.
Well,
Sorry, so I didn't really hear the question. Do you think you could just summarise what the question was, please?
yeah, I think I was being asked why, when new standards are introduced, it's not on day one that every building that's then started has to be the new standard. And there's a rollover period of applications or approvals, rather, which haven't been implemented, which are approved under the old standard. Well, the first thing to say in my defence is it's exactly the same as it always has been. I mean, there's always been a 3-year cycle of setting standards, and then you start the new cycle of seeing what people want to, what they believe should be the area for change and improvement in 3 years' time. There's a year more or less of discussion, there are decisions which will be taken at the end of this year. There's a year of getting industry ready, because it may be new technologies, training staff, all sorts of things, and then the implication in the the implementation in the 3rd year. And of course it's that final bit which is why it's not that easy to say you've got to go back to the drawing board and start again. if you introduce new standards, because it may need new technologies, it may need, may make contracts unviable, it might do all sorts of things. So that's where we are at the moment. I take note of what you've said, and I will certainly consider whether there's any way of changing implementation in 3 years' time. 2013 will be the next October 2013 is expected to be the next generation, and it's certainly something to consider. But there are real practical reasons why it takes 3 years. I mean, I'm frustrated by that. Why not a 2-year cycle? I got to the department and said, can we have a 2-year cycle? And people kind of fell off their chairs and fainted and so on. And there are some real difficulties because of the building industry is not exactly hyperactive in terms of innovation and so on. It takes them a while to get there.
Does that satisfy you, Alex?
Yeah, maybe one comment to it. I fully agree with you that there is a cycle and there will always be carryover. So you just can't change it. But we got the impression, and last year, the figures were, I think, astonishing to see how many properties could still be brought up. So I think you're right, there is always a carryover, but we feel there is quite some space to reduce that amount of carryover of old standards. And the other thing I think you mentioned, the discussion about bringing the cycle back from 3 years to 2 years. I think there is another point you mentioned earlier that is very relevant here. I don't think there is that much to gain by changing the cycle from 3 to 2 years. But a lot is to do on the performance you insisted on. Is to make sure not only that on the design phase it all looks great on paper, but actually that what is being built will actually deliver what is aimed for in the regulation.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to completely take this over, but I mean, before I got this job, I had been going on about compliance, and I steered onto the statute book, the Sustainable and Secure Buildings Act in 2004, and I've been on this case for quite a long time. And I am really genuinely concerned that we are setting higher and higher standards, which I thoroughly approve of, but we're failing to achieve them by a bigger and bigger margin. And closing that compliance gap and performance gap is a big job. And I've set some targets, if I can put it that way, for my compliance advisory group to come back to me and say, what is the quickest and most effective way we can close that performance and compliance gap? At the moment they're telling me it's going to take so long, I'm not really happy with that. So I'm really, really pushing on that issue, and it is a top issue. And as I say, now we're having more tests of zero carbon homes and other zero carbon buildings. The results coming back are really disappointing. They are not achieving what the designers thought they were going to achieve. And that is no way for us to run a carbon reduction policy.
That's very interesting, thank you. Right, we'll take them 3 at a time, I think, and keep things going. This is a gent there, a lady at the back, and a gent there.
Andrew Reingold, Executive Director from the Aldersgate Group. When the Green Investment Bank proposals were being developed, the government ruled out investment in the Green Deal. But when the Green Investment Bank report was launched last month, it now is under consideration. So I'd just like to ask the Minister what was behind the change of thinking. I'd also like to ask the panel if the Green Deal needs either the Green Investment Bank or financial subsidy in order for it to work.
Nick Clegg specifically ruled it in, didn't he? Didn't say it was under consideration. He said yes, it would be. We were the same event. Lady back there.
Yeah, hello, I'm Denise Shevin, I'm a freelance journalist, I write about the built environment. Just to pick up Mr. Scullin on what you were saying about compliance with the building regulations, and my understanding was when this last change has been implemented, people had actually a far longer period to start building the new homes with this newer, tougher standard. And basically, house builders flooded the market with planning applications, maybe even things they weren't going to build for sort of 5 years, but still are able to build under the old regulations. I mean, it just seems to make a mockery of toughening regulations, really.
Adam Chase from E4Tech, we're an energy consultancy. Jeffrey in his opening remarks referred to using a product which is in effect carbon negative, in other words the embodied energy and carbon of materials. And there is the potential, I believe, for us to drive towards energy efficiency solutions which may actually be net carbon, not necessarily net carbon negative, because the embodied energy in those insulation materials and products are not are actually going in the opposite direction. So my question is, does the panel recognise that there is the danger for unintended consequences? And if so, what legislative steps might be possible to mitigate?
Well, Andrew, those things are directly used, so we'll come to you in the first instance and then work our way along.
Well, the Green Investment Bank, as you quite rightly said, I think is able to do its job, which is wide-ranging. It will be starting its commercial isn't quite the right word, but investment activities next year, as I understand it. It will be 3 or 4 years before it has kind of real substantial capital to do very big jobs. But I think it's going to be a very important trigger or promoter of schemes which are not attractive for short-term, what you might call bankers' investment, and which are prepared to look at the longer term. On the compliance issue, well, first of all, it's not good enough to have got planning permission. You've got to have building regulation approval, and a lot of planning went in, but I'm not convinced at all that there's much evidence that a huge amount of building regulation approval went in. It's one thing to get outline planning approval, and different to get building regulation. However, as I've said, I don't think there was any change at all in the way that we approached it. Well, I know there wasn't any change. I mean, all that happened was we went through exactly the same processes as before. The crucial decision was, do we implement the consulted changes? Do we make the 25% rise in standards? And we did, and we have. If there's something to be tightened up next time, as I said to Hans, I'm quite open to looking at what opportunities are to do that. Adam made a point about, as I understood it, about embedded energy and whole life costs. I mean, there are, I'm sure again everybody in this room knows, I mean there are at least 3 elements in the life of the building. There's constructing it, there's living in it, and there's demolishing it. And building regulations deal with the constructing it bit, not really with the rest of the operation. So there's certainly a lot of other work in other parts of the forest, so to speak, to be done to tackle some of that. I think we're some way off having a good enough or a robust enough understanding of what the whole life costs are of building materials and putting up homes and so on. And what's the whole life cost of building the timber and burning the timber at the end? What do you do with the demolition and so on? All I would say is that right back in 2004, my act includes the possibility of regulating for those things. It's some way off the current agenda, but it's certainly legislatively possible as a result of the bill I put on the statute book 8 or 9 years ago.
But you seem at least to have sidestepped the first question, or rather waffled your way through it. Is the Green Deal in, out of the Reinvestment Bank? What's happening there?
Well, you're quite right. I waffle my way around it because I don't want to put my foot completely in it. I mean, I'll just make it clear that I'm a third-tier minister in the Department of Communities and Local Government. I'm not the Secretary of State for Business Innovation and Skills. So I think I'll have to get his take on that. But what I would say about the Green Deal is that it's governed, if you like, by the golden rule. That is to say, the finances of the Green Deal stack up, or don't stack up as the case may be, by a reasonable assessment of the amount of energy that will be saved as a result of putting in the improvements. And it's that energy saving which pays ultimately for the improvements. And so not everything will fit into the Green Deal because the cost of doing it won't have a payback period which is worthwhile, which is where the energy company obligation money comes in. There is significant amounts of money there which are also available for tackling some of the issues which arise from that. And I believe that DEC intends that will be particularly targeted at tackling fuel poverty. So you can have a double hit there with tackling fuel poverty and also getting better energy performance. But I would need to turn over the page and read the other side of my brief to answer in more detail.
Thank you, Andrew. What I would say anyway. Hans, do you want to comment on anything?
No,
just maybe a comment on the embodied energy. I think a lot of focus is on the energy efficiency because there's the biggest gains to be made. Once we get to levels of energy efficiency that become really excellent, it's clear that embodied energy gets a far bigger weight in the whole equation. But what we need there, and we would be very much in favor of that as an industry, but is a very transparent approach to life cycle analysis. Because the products you used after you burn down your house to build it up again, they are seen as natural, and they are great products in one sense maybe, but I think there is a lot of perception of people thinking that as soon as a product is natural, that by default is very sustainable. And I think we need a far clearer framework that not products that are produced in an industrial way by default are seen as not sustainable. Because we can provide you with full life cycle analysis around our products and they show excellent sustainability credentials, far better than many so-called natural products. So I think the transparency there is going to be crucial.
Yes, I should say it wasn't to its natural, but it's actually embodied carbon as it grew. It's valuable, which rock will, so far, rock grows rather slowly, I think, isn't it? Go.
I just come back quickly on Andrew Reingold's point about the Green Investment Bank. I think, and the answer kind of reflects this, there's huge confusion about what the Green Investment Bank is for. There's a massive land grab from everyone involved in the green industry, and I'm sure plenty of people in this room who are trying to get funding out of it, whatever it might be. And I think when you look at it from the Green Deal point of view, you know, we look at the interest rates issue and whether you can get the interest rates down so it's more attractive. I think getting the incentives, understanding the incentives and how the Green Deal is going to work in practice is really important. And that's kind of, you know, there's a lot of talk by Hans about it's, you know, greater incentives to the Green Deal. Of course, for the householder, the incentive is to reduce your energy bill. And if that opportunity is genuine, then with increasing energy, and you know we've seen the price rises recently, that will become a stronger factor. But as I mentioned right at the start, also equally important is a lack of information. People just don't understand where they waste energy or use energy or where they can do better. And I think you know, smart meters and better billing will have a part in that. And then we've got the behavioural issue, which the Green Deal will help. But I think on the incentives, everyone's pushing for tougher and tougher incentives on this. I think we've got to be cautious because the strong incentive of price and saving money is already there.
And it's interesting that really the Green Investment Bank probably won't start for 3 or 4 years having real money. And this fits in quite well with the kind of thing that we're trying to do in Birmingham, where we're utilising the local authorities' ability to raise money cheaply, linking that in with the utilities' responsibility to help fuel poverty. And bringing in private money. And I think the role of the Green Investment Bank could well be when that private money and local authority money gets to a stage, we think roughly 300 million, where then a bond issue could take place and the pension funds will come in. And so what the Green Investment Bank might want to do is have a small layer of capital there, encouraging that final take-up by the big beasts and pension funds, which is going to be so crucial. I think the other thing, not just Green Investment Bank, but a very important use in the whole energy efficiency thing of public money is to act as a guarantor when things go wrong, because you know, it's mostly apple pie stuff, energy efficiency, but if occasionally things do go wrong, then if there is something that acts as a bit of a baseline, then that I think would be more of an encouragement for private money to come in.
Thanks. Well, I'm going to advise over 1:45, and we have a plethora of questions. Now the gent, is he gone? Someone who had his hand up before, I was going to, seems to have disappeared. disappear. Should we take 5 and see if we can manage it in time? Yeah, okay. Right, hands up. We'll have, gosh, good God, how must we do it? We'll have the gentleman in the middle there, we'll have the gent behind him, we'll have the lady there, and then we'll have 2 from this side, the gent there, and the lady at the back. Yes, please. Sorry about this. If we get through very fast, we'll take the other 2 who've been left out. Is that all right? Quick questions, please. Yes. Anything will be, statements will be ruthlessly cut short. You're on.
Neil Hurst, Grantham Institute, Imperial College. We've just done a big study of China and their carbon saving potential. In most areas, there's not a lot we have to teach them. But in this area, one of the big areas where that is not the case, where they have these fantastic problems of demonstrating and enforcing and building efficiency standard. I wanted to ask them this stuff. Do we have a dialogue? Are we trying to help them in this area?
Very interesting. Next question.
Hi, it's Prashant Zay from Consumer Focus. I've got a question about the cost of finance. A number of people here have talked about low-cost finance. Colin, I think the New Deal actually raised finance about 2.5%. A similar kind of rates to what KfW do through their investment bank. A lot of this is essentially through government subsidy. I don't think that's on the cards here in the UK for obvious reasons. The question is, why don't we do policies to unlock private sector finance? Cash ISAs raise finance at 2-3%.
Okay, very good. That's enough.
Hi, Beatrice Orchard from the Federation of Master Builders. Sorry, Mr. Chair, to hear you had such a problem with your builders. Maybe we can talk about it.
They're members of your organisation.
No, we should definitely talk about it later. I just wanted to go back to incentives and get the Minister's perspective, please, on whether he thinks that the government, in their response to the Low Carbon Construction Innovation and Growth Team report that we're expecting very shortly, will follow the recommendation in that report that there should be additional fiscal incentives to support the uptake of the Green Deal.
Simon Rotalic from the Carbon Trust. It's worth bearing a thought about the contribution to emissions from non-domestic buildings, given that they're about 1/5 of UK CO2 emissions. Could the Minister clarify the government's intentions? Non-domestic buildings often seen as a sort of poorer cousin to domestic when it comes to government focus. But we greatly welcome clarification on intentions, for example, around zero carbon targets for non-domestic buildings, the rollout of DECs, etc., and other potential triggers for uptake of the Green Deal from non-domestic buildings. Thanks.
Thanks. Jackie Jones, energy writer and editor. We know that deep refurbishment of domestic buildings can achieve reductions of carbon emissions of between 65 and 80%. Do you anticipate that the Green Deal can deliver reductions of that level? If not, what sort of level are you looking at? I'd also be interested to hear about the Birmingham example there. Any concerns that if it's a shallower level, what we're likely to be seeing is an added level of comfort in those homes, but not actually a particular drop in energy consumption?
Okay, well, we'll leave the Minister a bit of time to absorb all those questions. So we'll start with Colin, as there was a question to Birmingham, and we'll come right along.
Very quickly, on the cash ISA thing, there should be Granny Goes Green bonds produced by the post office, so people can actually put some of their savings in their locality. But as I was saying earlier, the end goal of a lot of us working with local authorities is to eventually build up enough that we can get the pension funds in, because they're 80-100 billion a year they get each year, and they're £1 trillion pot, so they're very crucial. On the Birmingham example, what to do. I mean, one of the crucial things is to learn from mistakes and positives from all over the place, because there's two aspects to, I think, a significant uptake on energy efficiency. The first is the money's there, but the secondly, and perhaps more importantly, is why should people open their front door? So we've got to be very, very careful. So on the unintended consequence thing, I remember talking to someone that had done an absolutely tickety-boo energy efficiency project, lots of houses, everything down to the last minute, but they got a very bad mouthing from the customers because the scaffolders were peeing in their gardens and using the F word. So it shows you've really got to do it tight from beginning to end.
Just a quick thing, following on Jackie, the kind of rebound effect and how it's very difficult and it's politically horrible, but it seems the best way to do it from the research is to keep the price going up. You won't see many politicians say that. But I think when you're talking about smart meters and people understanding their energy much better and where they waste it, they create a kind of cycle of improvement. I think that's what we've got to lead towards.
Yeah, just on the incentive side, a lot is being talked about the people who are in a fuel poverty situation, and that's of course a too high percentage of the total population. But it also means that the other percentage is not in fuel poverty, and that's the category that is able to pay. And the market research we have done shows clearly that just a reduction of an energy bill is not sufficient for people to trigger a serious investment. So there are different ways. One is raising the awareness on what other elements the improvement brings. It's on the comfort area, it's on the aesthetics, many additional benefits, where actually people that are in an able-to-pay situation are willing to go for it, if they can find a hassle-free solution. On the financing overall, in several other countries, there are the energy performance contracting, which attracts a lot of third-party capital to finance these kind of developments, where basically a property is being assessed, a energy saving is being estimated, audited, guaranteed, and third-party put people in good bonds to actually finance those properties. So a lot of people there. In the US it's being applied, in Spain it's being applied. A very good tool to finance actually the greening of our buildings.
Excellent. The Minister's been scribbling copiously during all this time, so we're expecting very full and waffle-free answers.
I'll do my very best. We're not exporting building regulations to China. You might be interested to know that one particular aspect of building regulations is now more or less universally adopted, and that's structural integrity. It doesn't have anything to do with green stuff. The green stuff is going to be different depending on your wind speed, your temperature range, your humidity, all sorts of things like that. And we've got very UK-specific building regulations, which I don't think would export very well to China. Cost of finance, I think that point has been dealt with as well as I could anyway. I can't respond to a report where we're going to publish our response shortly, because they'd sack me if I did that. Carbon Trust asked a question about non-domestic buildings. We've reaffirmed our commitment to zero carbon in the non-domestic sector by 2019, and there obviously regulations will follow that, or push that even. The question about the Green Deal. The Green Deal mostly will do what I think you described as shallow rather than deep stuff, because deep stuff is expensive with long payback periods. And that brings me to my £100 million, how many carbon tons can you save? You're going to save a lot more carbon tons by lifting up a lot of F and Gs to C and Ds than you are by building a few highly specialist As. And I mean, in the hard world of how we pay for all this stuff, if the real aim is to reduce the amount of carbon we emit from our building stock, then getting the Fs and Gs up to be C and Ds is going to be a lot more effective. So I don't mind that the Green Deal is about shallow stuff, because it's saving more carbon per pound than all sorts of fancy high-level targets.
Well, thank you, Andrew, very much. I'm so sorry, we do have to end now. But I'm sorry, it's called from our less than I thought we had. But thank you very much for coming along and answering us so fully. And thank you to all the panel and for everyone for coming.